Hi, I'm Steve from Nearly Wild, and today I'm here with Liam from
Primal Nomad Bushcraft and Red Mason Heritage. So they're my two companies. One is a YouTube channel, just basically sharing my journey within the bushcraft world.
Yeah.
And my other business is my company restoring heritage buildings and conservation listed buildings as well. So
I'm going to ask you a really stupid first question, Liam, because I'm good at them. What is bushcraft?
So bushcraft really is all about going out and enjoying a woodland, a local environment, using traditional skills to be able to live and enjoy time outside, you know, go outside and cook, camping in a local environment and really understand the history about different skills and how people used to do things in the past, you know, not relying so much on modern techniques and modern tools, you know.
Yeah.
So really going back to basics a little bit, something that resonates within all of us, going outside and just relaxing amongst nature and using nature to help us as
Interesting,
well.
interesting.
So that's what it is to me. So.
It's interesting because I've also, I obviously asked you that a little bit pointed question because it comes up quite a lot, and I think different people have different interpretations.
It's a very hard thing to pinpoint exactly what it is, you know. Like even for me, it crosses over so many different points that it's hard to exactly pinpoint exactly what it is. But really, to me, it's about using nature and being at one with nature. Let's say we were looking to take residence here, for example, for a few days, what things we can use around us to make ourselves more comfortable and how we can make our time here enjoyable.
Interesting.
You know, without the worries of, oh, what am I going to do about, you know, let's say, for example, for shelter, what am I going to do for warmth, you know, what am I going to do for food? And it's one of those things that can make your time outside a lot more, once you start to understand these things, a lot more enjoyable and a lot more natural. You can instinctively be on a walk and notice certain things that you wouldn't have before, or you'd have just walked past.
So there's something in there that you're talking about as well that maybe relates to some of the other interviews that you've hopefully seen on the channel, which is this whole thing about nature-based business and that relationship with the natural world.
Yes.
So there's something there about you're not bringing something in, you're not massively looking to change, and you're working with what's there, and hopefully, presumably not leaving something behind. I mean, there's no waste in nature, as they say.
No, absolutely, and that's one of the big points in bushcraft is, you know, like leaving no trace and having a minimal impact in your environment. Obviously, there's going to be some aspects where you're going to be using firewood, for example, but you're using it in a respectful manner. You're not cutting down massive trees just for the sake of it, or you're not abusing the landscape, and that's the lovely thing about it. As you start to learn in it and you start to progress within bushcraft and within your own personal journey, you'll start to come across a way where you're in harmony and synchronicity with the woodland around you, and you start to, like you said, do things in a non-impactful way, or not relying on certain things that you're bringing from the outside world in.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because before we came on camera, we were having a bit more of a chat about some of the other work that you do in your other profession, which I think is a really interesting profession because a lot of it is about, I suppose, reconstruction archaeology, which is to some extent what some bushcraft is.
Yes, yeah,
and
100%.
You know, I mean, you were talking about traditional techniques where you're having to almost relearn how things were done.
Yes.
And so presumably that was something that helped spur you into some of what you now do in bushcraft as well, or is it, have you always felt them very separate?
It's a good point, actually. I mean, there's a very definite crossover point. You know, for example, I do a lot of work to do with historic brickwork, so there's a lot of crossover points with how bricks are manufactured and how different woods, for example, were used for different periods in the firing within a brick manufacturing process. So, and that again crosses over to what woods you could then use for different tasks that you're using within bushcraft. For example, if you're cooking a certain meat, or if you want to do things low and slow or fast and quick. So really, not only obviously with the brickwork side of it and the bushcraft side of it mixing, I mean, there's all sorts of things, for example, like with lime technologies that goes back to a very primitive development of skills from human ancestry, which I always found really incredible. So just how the mortar materials were initially made by burning a limestone, and that always links to me, and thought, well, you know, primitive people would have had that experience as well, and that makes me want to then go out and think, well, how can I then learn this out in out in nature itself and recreate it in a traditional aspect. So, you know, I think there's a lot of crossover points definitely within both crafts, I guess.
Yeah.
They're both a skill set that, like you said, cross over so intertwinedly. I obviously see some of the building aspects are more modern techniques, brick and block laying, for example. But the base elements are still there from historic aspects, for like you mentioned about dry stone walling to me earlier. You know, obviously brickwork would have evolved from that, and and dry stone walling evolved from a more primitive style of walling, which we see in Neolithic times and you know, pre that even, so which is interesting.
No, that's really interesting. Great. So one of the things I'm going to now throw at you slightly, Liam, is you probably aren't aware, but we have a very rare lime kiln in the village where I live. It's called the Hoffman lime kiln. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Yeah, very familiar.
So it's actually fairly fully restored, and it's on a location which is well known as a site that's probably one of the best locations showing the complete history of lime working. So there's lots of different types of kilns.
So all of the different evolutions.
Yep, from the very small bell pits and so on, right the way through to multiple bell kilns, through to then the Hoffman kiln.
Faceted chambered ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of that. So yeah, I'm hopeful we'll get together again and maybe do a bit more on that.
Great, I really look forward to that. That'd be so interesting, because you know, Hoffman kilns were a big turning point in lime development. You know, so it really solved a lot of issues that lime technology up until that point, firing couldn't go past a certain temperature.
Right.
So if that hadn't have been developed, in fact, we wouldn't nowadays have cement, because we just wouldn't be able to get limes up to a temperature high enough.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is
fascinating.
So I guess we can visit that when we.
That will be very interesting, because that was quite an interesting turning point. Certainly with cement, in terms of thinking about our impact on the natural world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that the other thing we've talked a bit about is the fact that obviously you've got a YouTube channel, and rather more professional on this than I am, but hopefully we can do a few more chats through and look at some of these things.
I'd really love to, yeah.
But I'm also interested in a little bit more about that other side of your work, in a way that I know that you're passionate about the natural world, and that when we have, you know, bushcraft can be low impact. There's some bushcraft that can be quite high impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's about trying to choose and understand those journeys. And I wonder, you've been quite through your sort of journey so far. How have you found setting up your own sort of business, if you like, thinking about bushcraft and getting more involved in that?
Yeah, it's been a difficult journey, because there's not much out there to go off. Looking at what areas I like to target and what route, and I'm still discovering that at the moment. It's obviously I really enjoy going out there and sharing with people my journeys and my little travels with friends, and going out camping, and different skill sets that I can use within that or those scenarios, for example. So it's a hard thing to decipher and kind of work your way through what avenue, but that shouldn't deter people, because it's great that there's so many options to choose from. And I think that's one of the really great things, is no matter what direction you do take, it's always going to lead to another little path, and so you can get sidetracked down something you never even expected to go down.
Right.
Which is where it's almost going for me, because I'm starting to really love to understand the history of things, and not only the skills that I can use now, but the skills and how they developed originally.
Right.
It's an open doorway in front of you, and to not get too hung up on, I want my channel to be shelter building, or I want to go out and I want to do just this. I can go to a campsite with an expectation and ruin it for myself, I'm sure, because I work myself into, I can't do this one specific thing.
Yes.
And that's not what bushcraft's about. It's about, I'm in this environment, I'd like to do that. The woods is dictating otherwise.
That's really interesting.
How can I, you know, kind of, work with it, I guess.
So to some extent, you're summarising for me one of the early lessons in people starting a business, and I think I'd just like to draw that out for viewers, which is particularly in nature-based businesses, many of us are doing it with a passion.
Yes.
We're doing it because we believe that the natural world is being damaged, and that people have to reevaluate the way we operate.
Yeah.
And we can very often be so value-driven, we forget that actually we also have to make a living, and there's an income element to it, and a market.
Yeah, it's an expensive thing to do sometimes, isn't it? Especially even going out and filming sometimes. not only does it take your time away from what you're going out to do, you know, there's certain elements of funding for the camera, for the, you know, even for the editing time, you've got to fit that in between work and what have you as well.
Yeah. So you're driven by passion. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely, yeah. And it can sometimes dwindle, but then, you know, as with anything, you've just got to, you know, take 5 minutes and just get back to it.
Well, that's really interesting, Liam. I mean, that chimes with certainly my own experiences of running businesses, and certainly the setup is you have to be passionate, you have to really commit, put a lot of time in that people don't really realise. It looks very easy to just, I just made a couple of films and there you are, and actually we all know there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just the research going into something to make sure you're putting the right information out there. You know, you've always got to double check as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, well, I've really enjoyed having a chat today, Liam.
Likewise.
And hopefully we can get out and about a bit more together and look at some of these stories, I think. It'd be very interesting. And maybe just share some of those experiences and share them with you.
Yeah, it'd be great to explore them, wouldn't it? See, you know, the history of our landscape and how they relate to so many different things you can do outdoors. Because it's not, like you said, it's not only bushcraft, it's not only, you know, the building skills, you know, there's so many other avenues which cross over into the wild.
Absolutely, no. It's going to be an exciting journey.
I think so.
Look forward to seeing you again soon. Anybody who isn't already aware of Liam and all his work, there's obviously more information at the bottom of the video with web links and so forth. Otherwise, thanks very much.
Thanks ever so much.
Really good to have a nice time out in the woods with you.
Lovely to speak to you. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, subscribe. If you didn't like it, leave a reason in the comments as to why.